Old Man bought two stunning women to free them, but ended up marrying them instead. He had lived long enough to see the ups and downs of life, the joys and the sorrows, and he had learned that true happiness often came from helping others. People often said he had a heart bigger than most, a rare kindness that could not be measured by money alone. Despite his age, he remained active in his small town, walking through the markets, visiting friends, and helping anyone who needed guidance or support. One sunny morning, the old man decided to visit the town market. It was his favorite part of the week because he liked seeing life in motion. The market was full of energy. Merchants shouted the prices of their goods, children ran about laughing, and the smell of fresh bread and spices filled the air. The old man wandered slowly, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the lively atmosphere. He did not come to shop that day, but rather to observe, to meet people, and to learn something new about the world he loved so much. As he strolled past one of the narrower streets of the market, he overheard a conversation that caught his attention. A small group of people was talking in hushed tones, glancing around nervously. The old man, curious, approached them slowly. He listened carefully, without making his presence known. The words he heard caused a deep pang in his heart. They spoke of two young women who were living under extremely difficult circumstances. They were being exploited, trapped in a life where freedom and happiness were out of reach. The old man's heart ached for them. He could feel their fear and hopelessness even from a distance. The more he listened, the more he realized how unfair life could be. These young women had dreams, hopes, and ambitions like any other human being, yet cruel circumstances had trapped them. Their laughter had been replaced by worry, their smiles by fear. The old man had faced many hardships in his long life, but he could not imagine living without freedom, without the chance to make one's own choices. A strong resolve began to grow inside him. He would do something to help them. He would find a way to rescue them from their situation. He walked back home slowly, thinking deeply. He knew that simply feeling pity would not be enough. He had to act, and he had to act wisely. Over the next few days, he began to plan. He considered the best way to approach the situation. It was not enough to just free them physically. He had to ensure that they would be safe and respected. He started by gathering information, speaking to people who knew the women's situation, and learning about the people who controlled their lives. Every detail he discovered strengthened his determination. He would not let fear, danger, or societal judgment stop him from doing what was right. During this time, the old man reflected on his own life. He had lived long enough to see many things, and he had learned that true courage was not in seeking adventure for oneself, but in protecting and helping others. He remembered his youth, when he had been reckless and impatient, often making mistakes. Now, with the wisdom of age, he realized that patience and careful planning were just as important as courage. He needed to approach this mission with both. It was not just about money or strength. It was about understanding, empathy, and the ability to connect with the hearts of others. Finally, after days of thought and preparation, he decided to take the first step. He had enough wealth to negotiate their release, but he also knew that money alone could not solve everything. He needed to show the women that his intentions were genuine, that he cared about their well-being above all else. He prepared himself, not just financially but mentally and emotionally. He reminded himself that he must be patient, respectful, and kind. Fear and mistrust might meet him at first, but he would not give up. He had seen too much suffering in his life to turn away from this chance to make a real difference. On the day he went to confront the people holding the women, he was calm and confident. He carried himself with the dignity and wisdom that came from years of experience. He spoke politely but firmly, explaining his intentions. The people were surprised. They had not expected anyone to care enough to act with such sincerity. Negotiations were long and difficult. The old man had to use not only his wealth, but also his patience and reasoning to convince them. Slowly, carefully, he managed to reach an agreement. By the end of the day, he had secured their freedom, and the two young women were finally able to leave the life that had trapped them for so long. When he first met the women, they were wary. They had faced many who promised help but delivered none. Their eyes were full of caution and fear, but the old man did not rush them. He spoke gently, with kindness in his tone and respect in his gestures. He introduced himself simply, explaining that he only wished to help them live a life of safety and dignity. He offered them shelter, food, and a chance to regain their freedom, but he never pressured them. Trust, he knew, could only grow slowly, like a plant that needs sunlight and water. Over the next few days, he focused on building trust. He made sure their needs were met, but more importantly, he listened to them. They shared small pieces of their stories, their past struggles, and their dreams for the future. The old man encouraged them to speak openly without fear. He did not judge them. Instead, he offered understanding and advice. He shared stories from his own life, tales of hardship and triumph, showing them that life could be harsh but also beautiful. Gradually, the women began to feel safer. They started to trust him, slowly letting go of the fear that had dominated their lives for so long. During this time, the old man also reflected on the power of kindness. He realized that true help was not just about removing someone from a dangerous situation, but also about nurturing their spirit, giving them hope, and showing them that life could be different. The women began to smile again, small smiles at first, fragile but genuine. They laughed at simple things, like a bird singing outside the window or a meal cooked with care. The old man felt joy in seeing their happiness return. It was a reminder that even in an old life, new purpose could emerge, and in helping others, one could also find fulfillment. As days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. The women began to see the old man not just as a rescuer, but as a person they could trust completely. They admired his patience, his gentle nature, and the wisdom that came from years of experience. The old man, in turn, found himself drawn to their energy, their resilience, and their hope for the future. It was a strange and beautiful connection, one built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. He knew that this was only the beginning of a long journey, but he felt ready to face whatever came next. By the end of the first part of their story, the old man had succeeded in his initial mission. He had freed the two young women, given them safety, and begun to nurture a bond of trust and friendship. But deep down, he knew that life had more in store for them. The journey of understanding, care, and companionship had only just begun. In a quiet moment, as he looked at the women laughing together, he realized that sometimes the most unexpected paths in life brought the greatest rewards. And with that thought, he prepared himself for the journey ahead, one that would change all their lives in ways none of them could yet imagine. The old man had successfully secured the freedom of the two young women, but he knew that true safety and peace required more than just removing them from danger. Life outside their previous world was unknown to them, and the adjustment would take time. He prepared his home carefully before bringing them in, making sure there was warmth, comfort, and privacy. He wanted them to feel safe and respected, not as guests, but as people who had regained a chance at life. When the women first arrived at his home, they were quiet, moving cautiously as if every corner might hide another danger. Their eyes darted around the room, observing every detail, every shadow. The old man noticed their fear and did not push them to speak or act. Instead, he greeted them gently and offered food, knowing that small gestures could help rebuild trust. The women hesitated but eventually accepted, their hands trembling slightly as they touched the plates of fresh food. The simple act of a warm meal made them feel a little safer, a little more human. Over the next days, the old man focused on creating a routine that would help the women adjust to their new life. He gave them space to settle in while providing gentle guidance. He encouraged them to share their stories when they felt ready, and he listened without interruption or judgment. The women were cautious at first, speaking in small sentences, hiding parts of their past in fear of being misunderstood. But the old man remained patient, understanding that trust could not be forced. Slowly, they began to open up, revealing the hardships they had faced and the dreams they had once held close to their hearts. The first night in the old man's home was quiet. He did not pressure them to sleep in any particular room, instead allowing them to choose where they felt most comfortable. They finally settled into rooms with soft blankets and clean sheets, something they had rarely experienced before. As he watched them, the old man thought about how life could be cruel and how important it was to offer kindness wherever possible. He could see the relief in their eyes, the way tension slowly left their bodies. It was the first sign of healing, and he felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing he had played a role in it. During the following days, the old man introduced small routines to help the women regain confidence. He taught them simple household tasks, not as chores, but as ways to feel capable and independent again. Cooking, cleaning, arranging flowers, and watering plants all were presented as enjoyable activities that could restore a sense of normalcy. The women participated hesitantly at first, but gradually smiles returned to their faces. They laughed at small mistakes in the kitchen and shared stories about their past, realizing that laughter was still possible even after suffering. The old man also encouraged the women to explore their talents and interests. One of the women loved to paint, and the old man brought her paints and brushes, giving her a small corner of the house to create freely. The other enjoyed music, and he found a simple instrument she could practice with. These creative outlets gave them joy and a sense of freedom that was entirely their own. They began to understand that life could hold happiness again, and the old man felt a deep sense of fulfillment watching their spirits grow. One afternoon, as the women were tending to the garden, the old man noticed how they interacted naturally, without fear or hesitation. They were beginning to trust not just him, but the world around them. He joined them in watering the flowers, sharing small jokes, and telling stories of his youth. The women listened attentively, their laughter mingling with the chirping of birds. It was a simple, ordinary moment, but it held extraordinary significance. It was proof that their lives were slowly transforming, from fear and captivity to freedom and possibility. Despite the progress, the old man knew that the women were still wary. He could see moments of hesitation when strangers passed by the house, or when unexpected noises disturbed their routine. He never scolded or rushed them, understanding that their past experiences had left deep scars. Instead, he remained calm and reassuring, showing them through action that they were truly safe. He accompanied them on short walks through the nearby village, introducing them to friendly neighbors, and gradually the women began to feel a sense of belonging. The bond between the three began to strengthen in ways that surprised them all. They shared meals together, sat by the fireplace in the evenings, and spoke openly about their hopes and fears. The old man's patience and kindness were constant, never demanding anything in return. The women started to appreciate his wisdom, not just for the advice he gave, but for the way he treated them with dignity and respect. Slowly, admiration grew, and they realized that this man was unlike anyone they had ever known. One day, the old man suggested they take a small trip outside the village, a simple walk to a nearby river. The women hesitated, afraid of the unknown, but he encouraged them gently, promising safety. The journey was slow, filled with pauses to rest and admire the scenery. At the riverbank, they watched the water flow and felt the wind on their faces. It was a moment of peace, a chance to breathe freely for the first time in years. The old man smiled as he saw the women laughing freely, unburdened by fear or caution. It was in that moment that he realized how transformative freedom and care could be. As the days passed, the women began to develop routines of their own. They explored hobbies, helped in the household, and even started preparing small meals themselves. The old man encouraged independence, knowing that true freedom came from the ability to make choices. The women felt pride in their abilities, pride that had been absent in their lives for too long. The old man's home had become a sanctuary, a place where trust, respect, and care could grow naturally. During one quiet evening, the women shared a personal story with the old man about the hardships they had endured. They spoke of betrayal, fear, and loneliness, their voices shaking at times. The old man listened attentively, never interrupting, simply offering his presence as a support. After they finished, he spoke gently, offering words of encouragement and hope. He told them that their past did not define them and that their future was theirs to shape. The women felt a warmth in his words, a sense of comfort they had never known. It was a turning point, deepening their trust and connection. The old man also shared some of his own life experiences, stories of loss, mistakes, and moments of joy. He spoke openly, showing that vulnerability was not a weakness but a strength. The women listened, fascinated by the life he had led, and began to see him not just as a protector but as a guide and companion. Small gestures, sharing tea, walking in the garden, exchanging smiles, began to create a bond that was more than simple gratitude. A quiet, mutual respect had begun to form, laying the foundation for something deeper. Evenings were the most peaceful time in the old man's home. They would sit together by the fire, sometimes in silence, sometimes in conversation. The old man noticed how the women's laughter had returned, light and genuine. They asked questions about the world, about his life, and about what lay ahead. He answered patiently, knowing that the process of healing took time. Through these shared moments, they learned to trust not just him, but life itself again. It was in these simple, quiet moments that the women truly began to feel free. By the end of the second part of their journey, the women had begun to feel comfortable, safe, and even happy in their new life. They were no longer prisoners of fear or circumstance. They were learning to live fully again. The old man had achieved more than just freeing them physically. He had helped them regain trust, confidence, and hope. It was a slow, careful process, but one that was filled with small victories, laughter, and moments of connection. Though challenges remained, the bond between the three was growing stronger every day. They were learning to rely on each other, to share their thoughts and feelings openly. The old man knew that their journey was far from over, but he felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing the women's spirits blossom. What had begun as an act of rescue was now becoming a shared life, filled with care, understanding, and the slow, steady building of trust. And so, as the sun set each evening over the village, the three of them would sit together, quietly enjoying each other's company. They did not yet know what the future held, but they knew that together they could face it. The old man felt a sense of purpose he had not felt in years, while the women felt a sense of freedom they had thought impossible. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where compassion, patience, and trust had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. The days in the old man's home began to feel warmer and more comfortable for the two young women. They had been living under fear and uncertainty for so long that even small moments of safety seemed extraordinary. Now, they could laugh without worry, eat without fear, and walk around without constantly looking over their shoulders. Yet as much as their surroundings had changed, their hearts were still cautious. They had been hurt before, and trust was not something that could be rebuilt overnight. The old man understood this better than anyone. He never forced them to speak about their past or participate in activities they were unsure about. Instead, he allowed them to set their own pace, offering help only when it was needed or requested. Slowly, the women began to open up. At first, it was small details, a favorite food, a childhood memory, or a dream they once had. The old man listened attentively, responding with warmth and understanding. He offered gentle encouragement and reminded them that their past hardships did not define who they were or what they could achieve. One afternoon, while they were preparing a meal together, one of the women started sharing her story. She spoke softly, her voice trembling at times, of a childhood filled with challenges, of people she had trusted who had betrayed her, and of dreams that had been crushed by circumstance. The old man did not interrupt or try to fill in the gaps. He simply listened, giving her the gift of his attention and respect. When she finished, he smiled gently and said, "You have survived so much, and yet you are still here. That shows courage, and that courage will guide you to better days." The other woman, inspired by her companion, began to share her own story. She spoke of long days spent in fear, of lonely nights, and of moments when she had felt completely powerless. She talked about her hopes that had been buried under the weight of her struggles, and her fear of ever trusting anyone again. The old man remained patient and calm, encouraging them with small nods and reassuring words. He made it clear that they were safe now, and that they were free to make choices for themselves. This simple act of listening without judgment helped the women feel respected and valued for the first time in years. As the days passed, the women began to participate more in the life of the household. They learned small routines, helped with chores, and even took the initiative to create small joys for themselves and the old man. They cooked meals together, planted flowers in the garden, and decorated the home in ways that reflected their personalities. The old man watched them with quiet satisfaction. He realized that trust was growing, not just in words, but in actions. The women were beginning to take ownership of their lives, showing independence while still relying on him as a steady and caring presence. Evenings were often spent together in quiet conversation. The old man shared stories from his own past, of mistakes he had made, lessons he had learned, and moments of joy that had shaped his life. The women listened attentively, fascinated by his experiences. They began to see him not just as a protector, but as a wise and understanding figure, someone whose guidance could help them navigate the complexities of life. In turn, they began sharing their thoughts and dreams more openly, realizing that their voices mattered and were being heard. One day, the old man suggested a small creative activity to help the women express themselves. He brought out paints, brushes, and paper, encouraging them to draw or paint whatever came to their minds. The women hesitated at first, feeling unsure of their abilities, but he assured them that it was not about perfection, only about expression. Slowly, they began to create. One painted a landscape, full of colors and movement, while the other sketched small scenes from her memories. The act of creating brought them joy and a sense of accomplishment, and the old man joined in, adding his own simple sketches to encourage them. These creative moments did more than provide entertainment. They became a way for the women to connect with themselves and each other. They began to share their creations, laughing and complimenting one another. Through these small acts, their bond with the old man strengthened as well. They realized that he valued their efforts not for what they produced, but for the courage it took to try and the joy it brought. The household began to feel like a real home, a place of safety, friendship, and shared experiences. During this time, the women also began to explore the surrounding village under the old man's guidance. They took short walks, observed the daily life of neighbors, and gradually became more comfortable in public spaces. The old man introduced them to kind villagers, creating an environment where they could experience social interaction safely. The women learned to trust the world outside their home again, discovering small joys like chatting with shopkeepers, observing children at play, and feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces. Each outing, though simple, was a step toward reclaiming a life that had once been denied to them. The old man noticed that the women were beginning to admire him, not just for his acts of kindness, but for the way he treated them with respect and dignity. They saw in him patience, wisdom, and a genuine concern for their well-being. Slowly, feelings of admiration and trust began to develop into a deeper connection. They were drawn to his steady presence and his ability to listen without judgment. In return, the old man found himself appreciating their resilience, intelligence, and the gentle strength that had carried them through so much hardship. One quiet evening, the women decided to share a secret dream they had never told anyone. They spoke of aspirations they had long buried. One dreamed of traveling and seeing the world, while the other wanted to pursue music and art more seriously. The old man listened, his heart swelling with respect for their courage and imagination. He encouraged them to follow these dreams, offering his support and guidance. For the first time in many years, the women felt that their desires mattered and that their lives could be shaped by their own choices. As the bond between them deepened, the old man introduced small rituals to create a sense of togetherness. They would share morning tea, spend afternoons reading or talking by the fire, and occasionally go on short trips to nearby scenic spots. These routines created a rhythm that was both comforting and joyful. They laughed together, learned together, and shared experiences that brought them closer. It was during these ordinary yet profound moments that trust turned into friendship. The old man also made sure to teach the women life skills that would help them become independent. He showed them how to manage money, make decisions about daily tasks, and handle unexpected challenges. He did so patiently, explaining each step and allowing them to try on their own. The women began to feel capable and empowered, realizing that they could navigate the world safely and confidently. This sense of empowerment strengthened their bond with the old man, as they saw him not just as a protector, but as a guide and mentor who genuinely wanted to see them thrive. Through shared meals, walks, creative activities, and conversations, the household transformed into a place of understanding and mutual respect. The women began to see the old man as a source of stability and warmth, someone who had come into their lives not to control them, but to help them heal and grow. The old man, in turn, admired their courage, their willingness to trust again, and the way they began to reclaim their identities. Their connection became one of deep understanding, friendship, and emotional support, forming a bond that could withstand the challenges of life. By the end of this period, the three had formed a unique and beautiful household. The old man had not only rescued the women from their previous circumstances, but he had also helped them rediscover themselves. They laughed more freely, spoke more openly, and engaged with the world with a new sense of confidence. Trust had grown, and friendship had blossomed into something genuine and lasting. The household was no longer defined by fear or uncertainty, but by mutual care, understanding, and shared experiences. In quiet moments, the old man reflected on the journey so far. What had begun as an act of rescue had evolved into a deep, meaningful relationship. He realized that true connection was built on patience, empathy, and respect. The women, too, recognized the value of this bond, feeling gratitude and affection for the man who had brought safety, freedom, and understanding into their lives. It was a turning point, a moment when their shared experiences began to lay the foundation for a deeper emotional connection. And so, as the sun set each evening, the three would sit together, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. They knew that their journey was far from over, but the foundation of friendship, trust, and understanding had been firmly established. It was a period of growth, healing, and the beginning of an emotional bond that would shape the next chapters of their lives in ways none of them could yet fully imagine. As the days turned into weeks, the connection between the old man and the two young women began to deepen in ways that surprised all three of them. What had started as a relationship of rescue and trust slowly evolved into something richer, warmer, and more personal. The old man noticed that he felt a protective fondness that went beyond simple responsibility. He cared for them deeply, not just for their safety, but for their happiness, their laughter, and the little quirks that made them who they were. The women, too, began to feel something new. They admired the old man not only for the life he had given them, but for his gentle ways, his wisdom, and his endless patience. His kindness was unwavering, and it was clear that he treated them as equals, not as people who needed to be rescued. They began to notice the little things, the way he smiled at their successes, the calm way he guided them through challenges, and the warmth in his eyes when he listened to their stories. Slowly, admiration grew into affection, quiet and unspoken at first, but undeniable. The old man, aware of his own changing feelings, took care to remain thoughtful and respectful. He knew that affection could be fragile, especially given the women's past experiences. He did not rush them or push for expressions of emotion. Instead, he continued to nurture the bond with kindness, patience, and consistency. He understood that true affection could not be forced. It had to grow naturally, like a tree rooted in trust and sunlight. One day, the old man suggested a small project in the garden. They had a patch of flowers and vegetables, but he wanted to create a special space for them to spend time together. The women eagerly agreed, enjoying the opportunity to contribute to something beautiful. They planted flowers, trimmed bushes, and arranged small stones along the pathways. As they worked, they laughed, shared memories, and spoke freely about their dreams. The old man joined in, sharing gardening tips and occasionally teasing them gently. These moments, filled with simple joy and teamwork, created a warmth that was slowly transforming the household into a place of true family-like connection. Evenings became more relaxed and cozy. After dinner, the three would sit together by the fireplace, sometimes in silence, sometimes in conversation. The old man would tell stories from his youth, adventures, mistakes, lessons learned, and the women would listen, fascinated. Occasionally, the women shared stories from their own past, not the painful parts they had already revealed, but the funny or sweet moments that made them smile. The old man laughed with them, not at them, and the warmth of shared humor created a bond that was unspoken yet deeply felt. One rainy afternoon, the old man suggested they spend time indoors painting and drawing. The women had begun to enjoy creative activities, and this was a chance for them to express themselves freely. They painted landscapes, flowers, and even abstract patterns, while the old man sketched simple images to encourage them. Watching them work, he felt a sense of pride and admiration. They were growing not just in skill, but in confidence, and he realized that he genuinely cared about their personal happiness in a way he had not expected. The women, meanwhile, noticed subtle qualities in the old man that drew them closer. His unwavering patience, the calm way he handled challenges, and the warmth he showed in everyday actions made them feel safe and valued. They began to spend more time near him, seeking his company not out of necessity, but because they enjoyed it. They started to share small jokes, tease him gently, and even seek his opinions on minor matters. Each interaction, no matter how small, deepened their affection and strengthened the invisible threads connecting their lives. During this period, the old man also encouraged the women to pursue personal goals. One expressed interest in learning more about painting techniques, while the other wanted to practice music daily. The old man supported these efforts, providing tools, guidance, and gentle encouragement. He celebrated their achievements, however small, and the women responded with gratitude and warmth. It was a mutual exchange of respect, admiration, and growing affection, each one learning to care for the others in deeper ways. As the bond strengthened, small gestures began to carry more meaning. The old man would offer his arm for a short walk, adjust a blanket for them when it was cold, or prepare their favorite meals without being asked. The women in turn began to show care in subtle ways, bringing him tea, arranging flowers he liked, and offering smiles that carried unspoken warmth. These small acts, simple yet meaningful, became symbols of affection, a silent acknowledgement that they were growing closer emotionally. One quiet evening, the women decided to share something personal. They spoke about their hopes for the future, their dreams that had once felt impossible. One dreamed of painting a large mural someday, while the other imagined performing music for a small audience. The old man listened intently, encouraging them and promising to support their ambitions in any way he could. It was a moment of mutual respect and emotional intimacy, where they felt comfortable revealing their inner desires without fear of judgment. The old man noticed a subtle change in himself as well. He realized that he was no longer just a protector. He was becoming emotionally invested in their lives in ways he had not anticipated. He cared deeply for their happiness, and the thought of their joy brought him genuine pleasure. He also recognized that he was starting to see them as more than companions. He admired their beauty, their strength, and their spirit in ways that went beyond friendship. These feelings were new and slightly confusing, but he accepted them quietly, knowing they were natural extensions of their growing connection. The women, too, felt their emotions shift. They had begun to admire the old man not just for his wisdom and kindness, but for the warmth he brought into their lives. They enjoyed his company, valued his opinions, and felt a sense of emotional closeness they had never experienced before. Their initial gratitude and trust were evolving into affection, a gentle and steady feeling that grew stronger with each shared smile, each laugh, and each comforting gesture. During this time, the old man and the women also faced small challenges together. A sudden storm caused minor damage in the garden, and a miscommunication about a household task led to frustration. But instead of allowing tension to build, they addressed these moments calmly, supporting each other and learning to work as a team. These experiences, though minor, reinforced their bond, showing them that together they could overcome difficulties while maintaining care and respect for one another. The old man also made efforts to integrate the women into the broader community, taking them to meet neighbors and participate in local events. At first, they were hesitant, but with his encouragement, they began to interact with people outside the household. Their confidence grew, and they started to feel a sense of belonging that had been absent in their lives. The old man observed their happiness with quiet pride, realizing that his affection for them had deepened as he witnessed their growth and self-discovery. As the weeks passed, moments of quiet intimacy became more frequent. The old man would gently check if the women were comfortable, help them with tasks, or simply sit nearby as they engaged in hobbies. The women, in turn, began to enjoy his presence in ways that went beyond friendship. They shared small smiles, playful teasing, and heartfelt conversations. These moments, simple yet profound, created a foundation of emotional closeness that grew steadily stronger. By the end of this period, it was clear that the relationship had evolved from one of trust and friendship into something more meaningful. Affection had begun to emerge naturally, born from shared experiences, mutual respect, and the consistent kindness of the old man. The women felt safe and valued, and the old man felt a deep emotional connection to them that went beyond his initial intentions. The old man realized that life had brought an unexpected blessing into his later years. What had begun as an act of rescue and kindness had grown into a profound emotional bond. He understood that affection, built on trust and respect, could flourish even in the most unlikely circumstances. The women, too, felt a new sense of emotional warmth. realizing that their hearts had begun to open to someone who had shown them nothing but care, patience, and understanding. And so, as the sun set each evening, the three of them would sit together, enjoying the comfort of shared presence. The household, once filled with fear and uncertainty, was now a place of warmth, affection, and growing emotional connection. They did not yet speak openly of love, but the feelings were there, quietly strengthening the bond that would shape the next chapter of their lives. The foundation of trust, friendship, and emerging affection was firmly in place, preparing all of them for the next steps in a journey none of them could have predicted when it began. Over time, the bond between the old man and the two young women grew stronger and more meaningful. What had begun as a relationship of rescue had slowly transformed into one filled with trust, friendship, and genuine affection. They shared laughter, meals, creative activities, and small adventures, and each day brought them closer together. The old man found himself thinking about them constantly, not just in terms of their safety, but in terms of their happiness and the joy they brought to his life. The women, in turn, had grown deeply attached to the old man. They admired his patience, his wisdom, and the unwavering care he showed them every day. They felt comfortable sharing their thoughts, dreams, and small worries with him, knowing that he would always listen without judgment. Their feelings had quietly shifted from gratitude and trust to something warmer and more personal. They realized that they truly cared for him, and the realization brought both joy and a hint of nervousness. One morning, the old man woke up with a feeling he could no longer ignore. He realized that his affection for the women had grown into love. It was a gentle, steady love, rooted in years of experience, patience, and shared moments. He had grown to admire their resilience, their kindness, and the way they laughed freely again. He understood that his feelings were not fleeting. They were deep and genuine, and he wanted to express them in a way that honored their trust and friendship. For days, he thought about how best to approach the situation. He knew that the women had been hurt in the past, and that any sudden declaration could cause fear or confusion. He decided to proceed carefully, with honesty and respect. One evening, after a simple dinner, he spoke to them calmly, expressing his feelings. He told them that over time, his affection had grown into love, but that he wanted their consent and happiness above all else. He emphasized that their comfort and trust were most important, and that he would respect whatever decision they made. The women were initially silent, surprised by his words. They had begun to feel the same warmth and closeness, but hearing it spoken aloud was both exciting and overwhelming. They looked at each other, then back at the old man, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Slowly, they realized that they too had grown to care for him in a way that went beyond friendship. They admired his honesty, his gentle approach, and the patience he had always shown. After a thoughtful pause, they expressed their own feelings, confirming that they shared his affection and wished to continue their lives together in love and harmony. With mutual understanding, the old man proposed marriage. He explained that he wished to honor their bond in the most respectful and meaningful way possible. The women agreed, not out of obligation, but from genuine desire to formalize the deep connection they had developed. They understood that their lives had been intertwined for months, and that the love they shared was built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. The decision was made thoughtfully and carefully, with all three fully committed to the journey ahead. Preparations for the marriage were simple but heartfelt. The old man wanted the ceremony to reflect their values, honesty, kindness, and love. The women contributed their ideas, choosing decorations, clothing, and rituals that held meaning for them. Friends and neighbors from the village were invited, and while some were initially surprised by the unusual arrangement, they soon recognized the sincerity and happiness of all three. The atmosphere was filled with warmth, respect, and celebration. On the day of the marriage, the old man and the two women exchanged vows in a quiet, meaningful ceremony. They promised to care for each other, to respect one another, and to continue building a life filled with love and mutual support. The women looked radiant, not just in appearance but in the glow of happiness and freedom they had found. The old man, though older and more reserved, radiated a quiet joy, knowing that his life had been enriched in ways he had never expected. Their vows were simple, heartfelt, and deeply emotional, reflecting the journey that had brought them together. After the ceremony, life settled into a new, harmonious rhythm. The old man and the women continued their daily routines, but now with an added layer of love and shared commitment. They cooked together, worked in the garden, and spent evenings in conversation or enjoying quiet moments by the fire. Their bond was no longer just about trust or affection. It had matured into a partnership built on respect, love, and understanding. Each day, they discovered new ways to support and care for each other, strengthening the foundation of their shared life. The women also pursued their personal passions more freely now, with the encouragement and support of the old man. One continued painting, experimenting with colors and techniques, while the other spent more time with music, composing small melodies that filled their home with warmth. The old man celebrated their achievements with pride, appreciating not just their talent, but the joy and determination that shone through their efforts. These shared moments of accomplishment and creativity added richness to their lives and further solidified their emotional connection. Together, they also ventured into the village more often, now recognized as a family unit. People gradually accepted and respected the bond between them, seeing the genuine happiness and harmony in their household. Children waved as they passed by, neighbors offered smiles and greetings, and the village slowly embraced the unusual but beautiful relationship. The old man felt grateful that society, which could have been judgmental, instead acknowledged the love and respect that existed among them. Even in daily life, the three continued to care for one another in subtle ways. The old man would fetch water, help with chores, or bring small treats to the women. They, in turn, showed their care through thoughtful gestures, preparing his favorite meals, arranging flowers, or offering comfort after a long day. These acts, simple yet meaningful, became symbols of their shared love and commitment, demonstrating that true affection is often shown through consistent, everyday actions rather than grand gestures. Over time, the women began to take leadership in certain aspects of household life, showing initiative and creativity. They organized small celebrations, decorated the home, and planned outings to explore nearby areas. The old man encouraged their independence, celebrating their ideas and supporting their efforts. This partnership, where each contributed to the household in meaningful ways, created a balance that strengthened their family unit. It was a life built on mutual respect, cooperation, and genuine love. Evenings remained a special time for reflection and togetherness. The three would sit by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and plans for the future. They talked about dreams they hoped to achieve together, places they wanted to visit, and the simple joys of life they now appreciated. The old man often reflected on the journey that had brought them together, from rescue to trust, friendship, affection, and finally, love. Each step had been gradual, thoughtful, and meaningful, allowing their bond to grow naturally and deeply. Their relationship also became a source of inspiration for others in the village. People admired the way they treated each other with respect, kindness, and understanding. The story of the old man and the two women began to spread quietly, a tale of compassion, patience, and love that transcended conventional expectations. Those who knew them saw that genuine care and trust could create a family in the most unexpected ways, and the trio became an example of how love could flourish when built on honesty, patience, and shared experiences. In the months and years that followed, the household thrived. The women continued to grow in confidence and independence, pursuing their passions and dreams. The old man found joy and purpose in their happiness, knowing that his decision to help them had brought lasting fulfillment to all of their lives. Their home was filled with laughter, warmth, and harmony, a place where every individual was valued and loved. They faced challenges together, celebrated victories together, and shared life in a way that was rich with connection and care. Looking back, the old man often marveled at how life had unfolded. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, rescuing two young women from hardship, had blossomed into a lifelong bond built on trust, respect, affection, and love. He realized that compassion, patience, and understanding could transform lives in the most extraordinary ways. The women, too, reflected on their journey, grateful for the safety, love, and happiness they had found. Together, they had created a life filled with harmony, respect, and enduring connection. And so, the story concludes with the three living peacefully, supporting each other, and proving that love can take unexpected forms. They had learned that true happiness is built not only on freedom or affection, but on trust, understanding, and shared experiences. The old man, once alone, had found family and love in the most unlikely way. The women, once trapped and fearful, had found freedom, respect, and a deep emotional bond. Together, they embraced life, grateful for the journey that had brought them together and looking forward to the years ahead with hope, joy, and unwavering love.